Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into a crypto controversy that's causing a lot of talk in the digital world. Remember that Bybit hack?
Yeah.
$1.5 billion, poof, gone. Just like that. Now people are saying the only way to fix this is to rewind the whole Ethereum blockchain. Sounds pretty wild, right?
Yeah, it really does bring up some really fundamental questions about what blockchain technology even is. And what are we willing to give up to keep things secure?
Exactly. So we're going to go deep into the arguments for and against this idea, with some help from this article called Ethereum, Decentralization, and the Rollback Debate. And for you listening, this is way more than just some crypto drama. This is about trust in our digital world and what happens when the code we all rely on gets messed with.
Yeah, it's a tough problem with no easy answers.
Okay, so picture this. The Bybit exchange gets hit, boom, 1.5 billion disappears, and suddenly everyone's talking about hitting undo on the Ethereum blockchain. But before we get into that whole rollback debate, let's take a step back for a second. Can you explain why decentralization is such a big deal in the blockchain world?
It's like the foundation, the whole reason blockchain was created in the first place. It's the opposite of those old systems where one big authority calls the shots. With decentralization, you've got this network spread out everywhere, like a digital democracy where no one person is in control.
So no big banks, no governments, just code running the show.
Exactly. And that's what makes blockchain so appealing. It promises transparency and security, no censorship. But like we see with the Bybit hack, it also comes with its own problems.
Right. And that brings us to something really interesting. Back in 2016, Ethereum actually did a rollback after the DAO hack. So why is it so much harder to even think about doing it now?
Well, Ethereum back in 2016 was like a brand new startup. Today, it's this global financial giant. Think of a huge city with skyscrapers built on top of each other. That's what Ethereum is now. It's DeFi protocols.
Right.
NFT marketplaces, layer 2 solutions.
Whoa. DeFi. Layer 2. For those of us who aren't crypto experts, can you explain that a bit?
Sure. DeFi, which is short for decentralized finance, is basically like a whole other financial system. But it's built on blockchain technology. It lets people lend money, borrow money, trade crypto assets, all without needing those traditional middlemen.
Okay, and what about those layer 2 solutions?
Think of them like express lanes on a highway. They're built on top of the main Ethereum network. They make transactions faster and cheaper.
Gotcha. So going back to your city analogy, are you saying that doing a rollback now would be like knocking down a bunch of those skyscrapers?
It would be a total disaster. Smart contracts would go haywire. Millions of people could lose their money. And the whole idea that blockchain is unchangeable, that idea of immutability that makes people trust the system, that would be completely shattered.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So we've got this massive financial world built on Ethereum, and messing with the foundation could make the whole thing crumble. But wouldn't getting that 1.5 billion back be pretty tempting? There have got to be people saying it's worth it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those who are for rollbacks make a pretty strong argument. They say it's about stopping the bad guys, setting an example, and in the end, protecting the users. After all, why should criminals get to keep what they stole? I
see their point. It's like this moral dilemma playing out online. On one side, you've got this idea that the code is the law, blockchain's immutability. And on the other side, you've got this human desire for justice and accountability.
It's the classic battle between sticking to your ideals and doing what's practical. And finding a way to balance those two is the challenge we face.
So let's imagine for a minute that the Ethereum community says no to rollbacks, no matter what. What are the other options? How do we make this system more secure without going against those core principles?
That's the million-dollar question. This article talks about a bunch of different solutions, each with its own pros and cons. One idea is to make security stronger at every level. We're talking things like multi-signature wallets.
Hold on, multi-signature wallets, what are those?
Imagine you've got a safe that needs multiple keys to open it. That's basically what a multi-sig wallet is. Instead of one private key controlling your money, you have multiple keys. Maybe different people or devices have them.
So it's like checks and balances, but digital.
Exactly. It makes it way harder for hackers to steal anything because they'd need to get multiple keys, not just one. And if you combine that with better audits of smart contracts, catching those weak spots before they're exploited, that could go a long way in stopping future hacks.
So it's about making the whole system stronger, less vulnerable. What other ideas are out there?
Another interesting one is decentralized insurance. Platforms like Nexus Mutual are already offering this. It covers things like vulnerabilities in smart contracts and other crypto risks.
Wait, you can get insurance for your crypto? How does that even work?
It's kind of like regular insurance, but with a decentralized twist. Instead of relying on a big insurance company, you're pooling your risk with a whole bunch of other users. So if someone gets hacked, the money from the pool covers the losses.
That's pretty smart. Like a safety net for the crazy world of crypto. But what if the losses are huge? Like in the Bybit case. Would these decentralized insurance platforms even be able to handle that?
That's a really good question. And it's one that the whole crypto community is trying to figure out. It's still a pretty new idea. And there are lots of questions about whether it can really scale up and if it'll work in the long run. But this idea of spreading risk and building a stronger ecosystem is definitely gaining traction.
Okay, so we've got multi-sig wallets for more security. We've got decentralized insurance for a safety net. What else is being proposed?
Well, there are also ideas that are a bit more controversial, like on-chain monitoring and being able to freeze transactions that look suspicious. It's a slippery slope, though, because it introduces that centralized control that a lot of blockchain fans don't like.
Yeah, I can see how that would be controversial. It's like trading one problem for another. You might get more security, but you lose that decentralization that makes blockchain special.
Exactly. It's a tough balancing act. And then there are even more radical ideas being tossed around, like new governance models for Ethereum. Imagine a system where the community can vote on special cases, like the Bybit hack, and maybe step in without messing up the whole network.
So like a decentralized Supreme Court for the blockchain?
Yeah, something like that. But it's still in the very early stages of development.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue with no easy answers.
We've covered a lot here. But before we move on, I want to go back to that on-chain monitoring idea. How would that even work in the real world?
Well, imagine a system that's constantly looking at transactions as they happen. It would be searching for anything that seems fishy, like really big transfers of money or activity from known hacker addresses.
So like a blockchain detective.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that bring up some serious privacy issues?
Absolutely. It's a trade-off for sure, and one that the community needs to think about really carefully. Who decides what's suspicious? Who's in control of the monitoring system? These are important questions we'll need to answer if we go down this road.
It seems like every solution has its own set of problems. This is definitely a conversation that needs to keep going. But for now, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll explore what all this means for the future of decentralization.
Sounds good to me. There's a lot more to unpack here. It's really interesting how this whole debate goes beyond just the technical stuff about blockchain.
Yeah, you're right. It makes us think about these big questions of trust and security and what role technology plays in our lives.
Exactly. We're basically arguing about how much power we're willing to give to code, and if there are ever times when humans should step in, even in a system that's supposed to run on its own.
It's like that old question of rules versus exceptions. Are there ever times when it's okay to bend the rules or even break them, even if those rules are written in code?
Precisely. And the Bybit hack really highlights this dilemma. It's a real-world test for those ideals of decentralization, and it forces us to ask some tough questions about what we have to give up.
So let's say we stick to those principles of decentralization, no matter what. Does that mean we just accept these massive hacks as the price of doing business with crypto?
Well, it's not that simple. Remember all those other solutions we were talking about? Those become even more important if we're not doing rollbacks.
Right. The multi-sig wallets, decentralized insurance, even that controversial on-chain monitoring. But are those things really enough to stop another Bybit-level disaster from happening?
That's the big question, isn't it? And to be honest, no one really knows for sure. We're still early in this whole experiment, and we're learning as we go.
It's like exploring a new world. You know, this reminds me of the early days of the internet. There was so much excitement, so much hope that it would connect everyone and give power to individuals. But now we've got problems like censorship and surveillance, and all this power in the hands of a few big tech companies.
It's definitely something to learn from, and it shows how important it is to be careful and thoughtful about how we build and manage these new decentralized systems.
We need to learn from those past mistakes and put things in place to make sure these technologies help humanity, not the other way around.
Absolutely. And that brings us to you, the listener. Because the future of blockchain isn't going to be decided by some tech company in Silicon Valley. It's going to be shaped by all of us.
So what can we do? How can we be part of this and make our voices heard?
The most important thing is to educate yourself. Learn about the technology. Understand the risks and the opportunities. Don't just blindly follow the hype or dismiss it completely.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge the assumptions. and really think about what these technologies mean.
Exactly. The more we know and the more we participate as individuals, the better we'll be able to create a decentralized future that matches our values.
It's kind of empowering to think that we actually have a say in this.
It is. And that's what's so cool about this whole space. It's still early enough that we can influence where things go.
Speaking of influence, I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on those different solutions. Let's go back to that on-chain monitoring for a minute. It's a controversial idea, but could it actually work?
It's a tough one. On one hand, being able to spot and freeze suspicious transactions could be really helpful. It could stop those big thefts like the Bybit hack.
But on the other hand, it brings in that centralized control the blockchain is supposed to get rid of.
Exactly. And it raises a whole bunch of ethical and logistical questions, like who would be in charge of the monitoring system? What rules would they use to decide if a transaction is suspicious?
And how would we make sure that this system wouldn't be used unfairly or to stop legitimate activity?
Oh, good points. And that's why the crypto community is so divided on this.
It seems like we're back to that same struggle between security and decentralization.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to have both?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something we'll need to keep talking about as this technology keeps developing. There might not be one perfect answer, but by being open and honest in our discussions, and by thinking about the consequences of our choices, hopefully we can find a way forward that finds the right balance.
Well said. This has been a really interesting conversation. It's given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's always great to dive into these complicated issues with you.
You know what else is really interesting? The fact that we're even having this discussion at all. It shows that blockchain technology has grown up to the point where these philosophical and ethical questions aren't just theory anymore.
There are real problems with real consequences.
Exactly. And the decisions we make today will shape the decentralized future we end up with tomorrow.
So we better choose wisely.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Ethereum rollback debate.
It's been a thought-provoking journey.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you, the listener, to keep learning about these complex issues, challenge your own ideas, and join the ongoing conversation about the future of decentralization.
Because in the end, the power is in your hands.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring.
As we wrap up, it's important to remember this whole Bybit hack and the rollback debate, it's just one part of a much bigger story.
Yeah, it's like we're watching this tech revolution happen right in front of us.
Yeah.
And this is just one of those big moments we're going to see.
Exactly. And like any revolution, it's going to be messy and unpredictable and full of challenges.
But also full of potential. Think about how blockchain is already changing things and giving people more power, from money to art to even how we govern ourselves. The possibilities are huge.
Absolutely. But with that potential comes responsibility. We need to be careful about the ethics, the unintended consequences, and making sure these technologies are used for good.
You said earlier that the future of blockchain is in the hands of the listeners. That really resonated with me. It's easy to feel like these big tech changes are just happening to us, that we're just along for the ride.
But that's not true at all. We all have a part to play in shaping this decentralized future.
So let's talk about that. What can listeners do to get involved, make their voices heard, and contribute to this?
Well, first things first, stay informed. Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, and talk to other people who are interested in this stuff.
Don't be afraid to get into the nitty-gritty details, but also don't get lost in all the technical jargon.
Focus on understanding the main ideas and how these technologies can impact us.
And don't be afraid to challenge the way things are. Ask tough questions, explore different viewpoints, and really think critically about the assumptions in this space.
Because the future of blockchain isn't going to be decided by a few big companies or investors. It's going to be shaped by the combined knowledge and actions of people like you.
I love that. It's a reminder that even when things seem really challenging, we still have power.
We do. And the choices we make now will determine what kind of decentralized future we get.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. We've been talking a lot about the complicated parts of the rollback debate, but really it's a conversation about our values.
What matters most to us? Security or freedom? Being independent or taking responsibility together?
These are big questions we need to wrestle with as we navigate this new tech world.
And there are no easy answers. But by talking openly and honestly, and by thinking about the consequences of our choices, we can work together to build a decentralized future that works for everyone.
Thanks for sharing your insights. It's been great exploring these complicated ideas with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, keep exploring. Keep learning and keep engaging with the world of blockchain because the future is being created right now and you have the power to be a part of it.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring the amazing world of decentralization.